Well, a good gauge of how effective these protests are is how establishment media hacks respond to them.
Yeah.
And we got a very good window into that when Rachel Maddow covered the Rage Against the War Machine rally, where she basically launched into one of the most disingenuous clips I've ever seen. And that's saying a lot coming from Maddow, who's like a unhinged Trump-Russia conspiracy theorist and a warmonger, supports the proxy war with Ukraine, wants to sacrifice more Ukrainian lives just so that Russia loses. And the way she covered the Rage Against the War Machine rally was just, it was disgusting. So
here's coverage from the QAnon leader, I'm sorry, Blumenthal leader, Rachel Maddow of Rage Against the War Machine on February 19th.
And I mean truly random rally on the National Mall.
Truly random. That's why I'm covering it.
A rally in support of Russia, I guess, given all the Russian flags, at least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there. There were some of the white supremacist groups you'd recognize from the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville a few years ago. Also represented prominently the remains of the bizarre Lyndon LaRouche cult. There were a lot of people with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. Also, at least one person who guest hosts for Tucker Carlson on the Fox News channel was there.
Former presidential candidate.
There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. There were cryptocurrency promoters. It was a really weird group. It was a small rally and a weird one. But that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose change and loose electrons that's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America should be on Putin's side as he keeps invading other countries.
Well, yeah, that was about what you'd expect from Maddow. It does show, first of all, that this rally actually broke through. Yeah. It was a real threat. It obviously was attacked by her. It was also attacked by Joy Reid. It was attacked by the professional sectarian left in coalition. I mean, you could call it, I don't know, like World Socialist Website and others. You could call it like the Red Lib Alliance. And it broke through also in local media markets. But Maddow, it's so funny how she keeps saying it's small, it's tiny, it's random, but she felt
weird.
So
she says weird like 10 times.
But she says weird because she doesn't have any contact with any people who are not entirely blue-pilled by every lie and psyop and the entire hybrid war operation that MSNBC on behalf of the American oligarchy is waging on the American mind. And she's so threatened that there are at least just a few thousand Americans who have seen through all the psyops, including, all the lies she told about COVID. And she said, if you take the vaccine, then COVID stops with you. She lied and said it prevents infection and transmission. And then she's attacking people at the rally for having been skeptical of that. She attacks people for being involved in crypto. Crypto.com is kind of a mainstream thing.
But it's better, Max, to be paid $35 million by Comcast. That's how you should be earning money, is through, hard American currency paid for by one of the world's biggest corporations to you for hosting a show. She hosts a show 1 hour per week because doing it 5 days a week was too much for her. So she hosts. So that's how you should be making money, is making $35 million. Just go ahead and do that, everybody. Don't try to make money elsewhere.
Well, so on the Russian flag issue, I was there. There was some guy waving one behind me for my speech the whole time, which was just idiotic. But there were like 2 or 3, maybe 4 Russian flags in the entire thing. They were all being held by people from one organization that has already apologized for it. And they were mostly on the outskirts, trying to do as much unintentional PR damage to the rally as possible when there were far more American flags. And then you did have this character, Matthew Heimbach, sorry to cut you off, Aaron, who was a former Nazi or current Nazi. I don't know what he is. Always was a suspect character. And he was walking around waving a Russian imperial flag and a Soviet flag at the same time, 2 things that don't really seem coherent. providing and he was way on the outskirts of the rally, giving mainstream media the perfect opportunity to try to smear the entire rally. You know, any rally that contains political dissidents or that is rallying against the status quo is going to attract some people with a few screws loose or people with extreme views. And the idea that they represent the entire rally or the tenor of the rhetoric on stage is absurd. So the tactics Maddow used were just the lowest, most propagandistic, cheap tactics possible. She was not there and she sent a team there. They didn't interview anyone. And it just shows what kind of, why people hate journalists and the media.
You know, I didn't like seeing the Russian flag there because, of course, that's going to be seized on by people like Maddow. But at the same time, people have the right to wave a flag of any state they want. I mean, Russia's a UN member state. People want to show support for Russia. That's fine. I mean, I was harsh on those flag waivers too because I thought they kind of spoiled the message of the rally. But at the same time, I don't want to deny someone the right to wave a flag. It's, you know, they have the right to support Russia if they want to, and it's not even necessarily a display of support for all of Russian policies. It's, you know, when you wave a flag, sometimes it's just a way of showing that we're all here on this earth and we should live together. So, you know, but of course, people like Matt are going to focus on that if one or two people do it. And the way she talks about Tulsi Gabbard, like as she describes her as a guest host on Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
I mean, Tulsi Gabbard used to be a regular guest on Maddow's show, and Maddow once praised her as a shining star. She said, get to know that name because she's going to be really famous in this party. And of course, all that changed when Tulsi Gabbard resigned from the DNC because they were rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders. And then she became not welcome anymore in places like the Rachel Maddow show. And then she talks about, she says, later on in the clip, she says, I don't mean any disrespect to those Americans who protested. Yes, you do. You're calling them conspiracy theorists. You're calling them dumb. You're doing everything you can to make them look ridiculous. So she's so dishonest and so actually not confident in her own position that she can't even own it. Like if you're gonna disrespect people, at least have the minimal awareness to not claim you're not disrespecting them. But she can't do that because she's actually not solid in her position, because she has to resort to McCarthyite smear tactics to do it. And even painting this rally as being in support of Russia, you had speakers there like David Swanson. I heard him condemn the Russian invasion and call for diplomacy, which is what this rally was about. It was about calling for diplomacy and not fueling this proxy war. But she can't process that thought because she only thinks in terms of an American government propagandist who thinks that we have to fuel this proxy war, and therefore diplomacy can't even be entertained. It can't even be acknowledged.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with Russian flags per se. I have a bigger problem with the Ukrainian flag flying over people's homes all over DC because we're giving them our money to wage this catastrophic war. We're not giving Russia anything. So, I mean, objectively speaking, that's where I stand. It was just really stupid from a PR point of view. When you know exactly what they're going to do. I told Nick Brana before the rally, like, if anything's going to happen to disrupt or destroy this rally, there's going to be some like Nazi showing up with some suspicious background, doing some Fed stuff to try to make it look like everyone at the rally is a Nazi. And
but the thing is, but the fact that Maddow tries to paint the rally goers as Nazis speaks to, I think, probably the dumbest irony of her little rant, which is that she is actively supporting a military that formally incorporates a neo-Nazi battalion into its ranks, the Azov Battalion. She's done propaganda for the Azov Battalion countless times. And here she is trying to portray people who want peace in Ukraine, who want negotiations, as being on the side of Nazis, when she is out there every single time she appears on her show doing propaganda for neo-Nazis. A neo-Nazi battalion, not just some random people with some whatever ties to a Nazi group who show up at a rally who aren't even a part of it, but an actual Nazi battalion that she wants to arm and fuel to keep this war going. Yeah,
and I hold her partly responsible for creating space for this war to take place with all of the lies and hysteria she drummed up around Russiagate. But let's take a look at what the rally really looked like from my point of view. I think people can judge for themselves. This is what it really looked like.
Coming up for you next, was there anybody here who
make some noise? You're the Grayzone. You're live.
They're going to get set up for us right now. Jordan is a liberty lover, lawful advocate, libertarian coming up for you.
Yeah, so it went on and on and on and on. That the crowd wrapped completely around the stage, so I could have kept showing people of that size, groups of people of that size, for another minute. And of course, many of them watched this stream. They watched Jimmy Dore. It really demonstrated our ability, Jimmy's ability, and the ability of everyone who's been doing this work online to bring people out in real life, offline. And I thought it was a display of power by groups of alternative and independent media outlets that have been denigrated as marginal. The crowd was obviously much larger than Maddow made it out to be. The march was like 7 blocks long when it got to the White House, and it obviously shook things up. And as I pointed out on Twitter, it broke through into local media markets. You saw NBC and Fox News affiliates from like Santa Barbara, California to Dayton, Ohio to Florida, all across the country covering this rally. And they covered it in a pretty objective way and showed pieces, tidbits of David Swanson's speech, and actually a fairly substantial part of Tulsi Gabbard's speech, which was an excellent speech about how Hawaiians were subjected to false alarm about North Korean ballistic missiles incoming in order to test the emergency response. They were essentially terrorized in order to test the response of average citizens. And the point Tulsi Gabbard was making is there are parts of the United States that will be on the front lines of any war as the Biden administration pivots to Asia and starts to ramp up its hostile campaign against China and North Korea. And, you know, the rest of the representatives and political elite in, you know, what they call in Alaska, the lower 48, you know, in the 48 states that are contiguous, they don't understand what Hawaiians go through. So Tulsi Gabbard has a unique experience to speak to, also as a veteran. Dennis Kucinich spoke about the need for congressional action on the Nord Stream terror attack carried out by the U.S. and the importance of Seymour Hersh's report. So I thought that was a significant intervention, along with all of the other speeches that we heard. And it was a success for all of the flaws in the rally. The fact that I don't agree with many of the speakers about major issues, it really was a success, and it opened space for, I think, for more. And we'll see what happens on the ground in Ukraine. That's really going to determine the course of action here in the U.S.
And again, if it wasn't a threat to the establishment, then establishment spokespeople like Rachel Maddow would not be devoting this kind of effort to smearing it. So it's a tribute to the organizers and the people who came out, that someone who has the agenda that you were challenging, which is a devastating proxy war, feels so threatened by it that she feels the need to go to such gutter lengths to smear it. Yeah. So everyone who took part in this should feel gratified that someone like Rachel Maddow heaped such animus your way, because that's a validation of everything that the rally goers and the organizers were trying to accomplish.